Hello, today's webinar is on how to create a new database with Qsales. So let's get started. This is a blank database, as you can see, record 1 of 1. We've installed Qsales and done really nothing else. So we're going to go through the install wizard, and when we're done, we're going to actually create a database from the data that is in QuickBooks. So let's get started. First thing, you're going to click on Tools, and you're going to click on the Qsales for Act install wizard. Now, it's important to note that we've already set up the Qsales API, the personal API. That's already been done. It's part of a separate webinar, so we'll just presume that that part has already been done for the purposes of this demo. Now, the first part of the wizard is going to ask you if you are working with an existing ACT database or a new ACT database. In this case, we're going to select a new ACT database because, as we can see, it's brand new, totally uncustomized with just the initial user configured. So we're going to select that, and we're going to click on Next. And now we're going to be asked to configure the admin settings. So click on here. Now, by default, this is not going to have any information in here. So you're going to have to go to your API. This I just dragged it in from off screen. Normally it would be down here. You see here where it says Qsales API. Going to double click on that, going to bring it up here, and you're just simply going to copy this, move it off screen, and then just paste it in here and then put in your API. Now your API password is what you created when you set up the Qsales API. So that's part of a separate lesson. So we're just going to leave it at that. And then we're going to, now that we've got that in here, we're going to test it. And it's working, it's valid. Now we're going to go to the next screen. Now, before we do, you're going to see these log in and log out of QuickBooks. Now, the reason that we have this is that many functions, when you've got multiple users, multiple QuickBooks users, require you to be in single user mode. So instead of stopping the API and going through all that trouble, this allows you to log the API out of QuickBooks and then log it back in. Okay, let's move on to the next one. The transaction sync indicates what kind of data, what accounting data, what transactional data we're going to be bringing into ACT, okay, when we're ready to do the import. Now, what the general rule of thumb that I like to use is to avoid any kind of non-posting transactions. So what are those? Those are transactions that don't contribute to balances, or those that don't contribute to either income or expense reports. So estimates and purchase orders are an easy selection here, and then pending invoices. So I've cleared those three. Link transactions to companies, yes. Payments, yes. Include sales taxes, of course. Auto link companies to contacts, that's your choice. The jobs feature. Now, jobs is basically a sub-entity of customers in QuickBooks. We don't add anything to the feature, but some businesses like to be able to analyze their costs and expenses and profit on a job by job basis. An example would be if you're working with a customer that has you service a lot of buildings. You may want to analyze your costs on a building by building basis and then build the customer in general at the very top. So this jobs allows you to do that, okay? We don't personally use it, okay, but we obviously support the QuickBooks feature. So enable auto link, first name, last name. As I said, we cleared this. Individual contact data sync, yes. Sync names, including, this is the sync items, okay? This is basically products. And then include customer fields during the sync, okay? The next thing is miscellaneous. Now, you'll see here, force all new transactions to be created as pending. This is important because a lot of people either have employees or subcontractors that they're going to allow access to Qsales, and they don't want them to write postable transactions to their QuickBooks file without them or their accounting team approving them first. So what we did is we created this option where if you check here, any transactions that you create within Qsales will be posted to to QuickBooks as pending transactions. So, no one's going to get emailed out. It won't change anyone's balance. So as I said, either the business owner or the accounting team has the option to approve it. And then past due alert minimum value. You'll see here, this is the past due alert. Every single business will have a different threshold for what they want to alert their users to in terms of overdue accounts. So this is where you can set it. By default, it is $50. Permission settings. This is important. Previously in prior versions of Qsales, you needed a one-to-one relationship between ACT users and QuickBooks users. So you didn't need any special setup, because if you had John linked from ACT linked to John linked in QuickBooks, then the security setup for John in QuickBooks was done at the QuickBooks level. Well, now that all the ACT users funnel through a single QuickBooks user, we have to have some kind of security set up for that. So what we've done, by default, this will be read-only, even if administrator initially. So we're going to click on edit, and then we'll see read-only, full access, custom, which allows a user to either create transactions, edit transactions, or view navigation bar, the transaction navigation bar. So what is that last piece? That last piece is over here, the QB transactions. This is the global QB transactions button. And what this will do is it'll show you all of the transactions that are visible within the QuickBooks company file. This obviously represents a certain security issue for some business users. They may not want all their users to see the totality of their business transactions. Could include a lot of sensitive information, or they can gather intel on the business's health overall. So that's an available security option for people to set up. So we're going to click on save and leave it as full access. And then the remote database settings are strictly for people that have their primary master database hosted in the cloud someplace, probably with a hosting provider, or maybe even with ACT. And the database that they're accessing with their Windows client is actually an RDB, or a remote database backup. So in that case, what you can do is you can set up here, you can actually set up the RDB to be the Qsales master. Okay, it can't be the master database, but it can be the Qsales master, and that will allow you to do certain functions within Qsales that you couldn't otherwise do with a remote database. Okay, with that, I'm going to click on OK, and now we're going to click on Next, and we're going to click on Build Fields. Now this Build Fields process, I'm going to just click here. I've already completed this process because otherwise this will take about 5.5 minutes. Okay, but these are your options. The contact fields, those are mostly going to be within the QB data tab. Okay, the company fields, opportunity fields, the custom table fields, all of these things should be absolutely required, the top 4. The last one, 4 to 5 year totals, I'm going to show you that later within the QB data tab, but we recommend that because it's the default settings. If your business hasn't been around for 5 years, I understand, but hopefully it will be around in the future in 4 to 5 years, and you'll want that visibility, and you're not going to want to wipe out your data just to recreate support for that. So let's click on Build Fields. I've already got it set up, so you can see that that process is very, very fast. Okay, now normally, as I said, it's about 5 minutes, but since the fields were already created, it worked very, very quickly. Now, if for instance, you've completed this process, what happens is it will now prompt you to restart your ACT database. If you come back into ACT and there's an error pop-up that says run this process again, this is where you return to. And I've seldom ever seen it take longer than 1. Okay, now I'm going to go back here because this has already been done. Okay, and now we're going to go to set field mapping. Now the mapping, obviously, because the 2 databases, the ACT database and the QuickBooks database, are talking to each other and exchanging data, it has to have a map of, what fields are used for cities, what fields are used for addresses, what fields are used for provinces or states. So this is where that information is. Now, on a first-time setup, you're going to see most of these things are going to be left as do not map. Just simply click on reset to default, and it will properly assign most of them. You will find in some cases for either the UK or Canadian databases, you may have to set the state to province and the zip to postal code, okay? But in most cases, you're dealing with a Canadian version of ACT, with a Canadian version of QuickBooks, or UK, USA, whatever applies. So you won't have to do much beyond the reset to default. You can scroll down and add additional mappings if you like, but for the purposes of this, we're just going to go through this. Okay, now we're going to click on next. Now, install the QB data tab. So what this does is this will create the QB data tab, which is going to surface all the fields in the contact table that QB data is going to present summaries of. So we talked about those, we showed you how all those fields get created very quickly. Now we're going to create the layout so that that tab and those fields can be surfaced. So we're going to click on install. Okay, now current layout, you can browse to another layout, but we've selected this layout. So we're going to click on add, and it's been created. And you'll see that it's basically taken the layout and it's added an underscore QB on the end of it. Now it's going to ask you, do you want to switch to that layout? Yes. Okay, that's done. And now we're going to click on next. Now, this is the stage where we're actually going to bring the data from QuickBooks to create a new database in ACT. So we're going to click on the customer link and sync. Now, because we selected a new database at the beginning, this tab was the one that we switched to. If we had selected the first one, then this would have gone, and where instead of creating the database with contacts, we would have linked the database with contact. But for this purpose, we're going to click on here, okay, and we're going to click on load data. And now it's loaded all the contacts from QuickBooks. Now this is a demo database, so this isn't going to take that long. Again, include jobs, you can select that here. Enable chunk is not really an option that you need anymore. We've really accelerated this process, so that's not something that you need to do. Query filters, if you wanted to kind of query specific types of QuickBooks data to shorten the list. But in most cases, there's less QuickBooks data in terms of customer records than there would be in an ACT database, because quite frankly, a lot of people will import in a lot of stuff into their CRM and are less likely to do so with QuickBooks. So we'll find, like even in our database, we've been running our business for 27 years at this point, and we only had about 6,600 customers, which is by ACT standard a relatively small database. So in this case, we've got about 57 or 59. We're going to click on create. And you can see the records creating down here. This process moves pretty quickly. And it will zip forward to, I believe, 59 when it's done. Okay, it's done. Done creating contacts. So now we just simply click on close and then next. And then it says to run manual transactions. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on cancel for now. We're going to come back to this. Okay, and you see it says 1. Well, in ACT, you're going to click on lookup, all contacts, and now you can see that the contacts are now in the database. I just wanted to pause and show you that that process had actually been completed. So now we've got all the contacts, 57, which means 56 were imported because we've got to allow for the first user. Okay, and we can see in general that the mappings came over as expected. These are phone numbers, these are the contact names, here's the company names, addresses, address to, city, province, so on and so forth. Okay, so now let's go back to the import, because if we go to any one of these records, we're going to see the QB data tab, and we're going to see the customer information here, the linking, the QB ID tab. This is what links a particular contact record to a particular customer in QuickBooks. It's identified the customer name, and it's identified what record type he is. He's a customer. But you see there's no data in here. Okay, the reason there's no data is if we go over to QB's transactions, there's no transactions. The reason that is that we haven't done any, all we've done is the link and sync process. So we've created the customers, we've linked them, but we haven't brought in the transactional data. So let's get back to that stage. So if we click here, now we could just advance through the wizard and get to the transaction sync, or we can just click on Qsales import, okay? Now, this is going to look familiar because this looks similar to what we saw during the admin wizard. Now, what it's doing is it's picking up the settings that we put in the admin wizard. So you can see estimates and POs were cleared, okay? We don't have anything else. Everything else here is fine. What we want to do before we run this, and this shouldn't take that long, but I just kind of want to review everything. 1825 is basically the number of days in 5 years. You can go back, if you set it more than the number of years that you've been in business, that's not going to make a difference because there won't be any data to import. However, we don't recommend, if you've been in business longer, really going back much further than that, okay, because you're not going to have the columns displayed as you can see here, okay, beyond that. Or you can go beyond, I know it says 4 years, but this also includes the current year, so it's 5 in total. Or you can go back as far as you like. Just understand, like anything, more is more. So if you put in, 10 years, which is like 3,600 days, then just be mindful of the fact that that's going to just take longer, okay? Now, during this initial sync process, this is a very fast one because we have a small database, but during the initial sync, just be mindful that it may take, if you've got, like we had, 6,600 customers with lots and lots, we had 6,600 customers, I think we had 50,000 transactions, and it took about 8 hours. So you're probably going to want to run the first one after hours, okay? And then it'll be ready for you in the morning. This one's quick, so we won't take that much time. So before we do anything, we're going to click on load metadata. What's load metadata? Load metadata is basically going to create the drop-down menus for all the data that we're going to be importing. Click on OK. And then we're going to click on sync items. Now this is basically the products. Okay, that's done down here. Now we're going to click on transaction sync. Could take several hours, but we know that it won't. Now this is where it will display down here, your progress. Now, obviously, we don't have a lot of transactions in our demo database. There's maybe anywhere from 1 to 5 invoices and not a lot of payments. So it's not going to take a lot of time to import in this data. I think we've calculated it generally takes about a minute to complete this whole process. But as I said, please allow for hours depending on the data size. More will be more. Okay, now once this is imported, it's going to run a refresh process that will populate all of these, okay, all of these fields. And then we're going to go through, I'm going to show you the QB transactions tab, and then I'm going to show you the QB items tabs, so you can actually see the data inside of ACT. Now, unlike other programs, this data is inside your ACT database. So what's the implications of that? The implications is you can take it with you. So ACT, one of the beauties of ACT versus other applications is because it's on premise, you can take it to the cottage, you can work with it on site, you can work with it in the office, you can work with it offline or online, and you will have this data actually in your database. So you will never be cut off from it. And if you've got Qsales installed on that database, you'll be able to see all the data, and you'll be able to do filters, you'll be able to do reports, do all kinds of things while, as I said, whether you're online or off. So as we can see, the progress here is 35 of 56. So we're still chugging through here. Now, just a reminder, you're going to see QuickBooks is open because the API down here, okay, over here, all of this data is being pulled by ACT, by Qsales, through this API from QuickBooks, okay? So not much longer to go, but you can see that this process after the install, depending on the size of the database, can actually be pretty quick. So if you're a new user to ACT, you've basically created a blank database. You now have all your new customers in there from QuickBooks, and you can obviously repeat the process with vendors, okay, to fully populate your database. Now you click on OK and click on Close. And now you can see instantly that all of these fields have tabulated. Now, it's important to understand that this data is not being copied directly from QuickBooks into these contact fields. What's happening is Qsales is taking this transactional information, okay, and it is then tabulating in here, creating summaries of all the data. Okay, so as you do nightly downloads and these information gets updated, then you're going to see these QB data summary fields get updated as well. So just to quickly see, you can see here's a transaction here, here's a transaction here, provides for the yearly total. It's indicating past due because we don't have any payments to this demo file. So it's displaying up here in red to be cautious because this person owes money, okay? And now you can see here the last invoice, the first invoice. So it's giving you the entire lifespan of the customer. And then you can see average sales amount, and then you can see lifetime sales amount. Now in this case, this customer has only been doing business with us for a short while, so it's not difficult to surmise those, but it's nice if you're dealing with a larger span of transaction history to have that kind of intel. Now, at this point, we have gone from having a blank database to having a fully populated database to having them linked to our customer, to our QuickBooks, and having all of that information in. So if I wanted to even go in and edit or view this transaction, I now have all of this information within my database where I can take with me. So if I want to take this home, take this to the cottage, take it off onto the customer site, I will have complete access to their entire transactional history. And with that, we conclude today's webinar. So just to recap, we took a blank database, we took Qsales, we went through the entire wizard, we created all the fields, created the layout, populated the database, imported in all the transactions, and then boom, we have a database that we're ready to go. Imagine if you were a QuickBooks user without a CRM, you didn't have a calendar, you didn't have a marketing tool, you couldn't email really anyone any kind of broadcast information. Now you've got a database, a CRM, and you're ready to get to work. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope this was useful.